The door creaked open like a coffin lid in a windstorm. Inside the old McGarry saloon, shadows clung to the rafters like cobwebs. 5 bounty hunters stood in a semicircle, pistols drawn, breath sharp with tobacco and fear. Outside, thunder rolled across the desert like a warning. Inside there was silence, until he stepped through. Rattlesnake Jake. He moved like a ghost, boots barely making a sound on the dusty floorboards. His coat was soaked with rain, his black hat was pulled low, silver spurs tapping softly like a clock winding down. The only sound louder was the rattle, the faint shir-shir-shir of the snake rattle coiled around the hilt of his custom Colt. Jake Hauser, barked the biggest bounty hunter. Dead or alive? Jake didn't answer. He just gave a slow, crooked and cruel smile. Then the thunder cracked again, but this time it wasn't the clouds, it was from inside. Gunfire. 2 bounty hunters dropped before they could even fire. Jake spun left, shot high and glasses exploded. Another man screamed as a bullet tore through his shoulder. A chair flipped. Then smoke and yells filled the saloon. The 4th bounty hunter tried to run. A mistake. Jake shot him in the leg, then walked over, placed the barrel between his eyes. "You blinked," Jake said and pulled the trigger. The 5th man? He was smart. He dropped his gun, raised his hands and backed away, whispering prayers to a god that Jake had long stopped believing in. Outside, the lightning lit the street. Inside, blood pooled around Jake's boots. He holstered his Colt, gave one last look to the man who lived, then vanished through the swinging doors like the ghost he was. Now let's take a look at how it all started. Long before the legend, before the blood-soaked tales and wanted posters, there was just Jacob Hauser. A boy. He was born on the cracked edge of the Arizona Territory, the only son of a miner and a weary woman who once played piano in a brothel. Life didn't offer him much, and it took even more. When Jake was 8, the well behind their cabin collapsed. He had been sent to fetch water, just like every other morning. But that day the ground gave way beneath him. He fell into the earth's throat, swallowed whole. 3 days passed before they found him. 3 long hollow days of darkness, cold stone, and silence broken only by the drip of water and the buzzing flies around the mule that had died in the fall. When they pulled Jake out, his eyes were wide open, but he wasn't crying. He wasn't screaming. He wasn't even shaking. He just stared. At the faces looking down at him. At the sky he thought he'd never see again. At something none of them could understand. The boy who came out of that well wasn't the same one who fell in. By the time Jake was 19, the land had shaped him into something hard and unforgiving. His father had been killed in a mine collapse, and his mother, Anna Hauser, was all he had left. She fought to keep the little patch of dry earth they called home, even when local men with badges and bank ties tried to take it. One of them was Virgil Cleary, a ranch boss with too much money and too little conscience. He sent 3 men one morning to force her hand. Jake saw them coming. He watched from behind the barn as they pushed her, shouted at her and slapped her around. And then, he moved. He slit the first man's throat before the others even noticed. The second turned, and Jake stabbed him, once, twice and a third time, dead before he hit the ground. Jake was fast and low like a desert cat. The third man tried to run, but Jake tackled him, pinned him down, and beat him with a rock until his skull cracked open. When the dust settled, there were 3 bodies, one shaking mother, and a boy with blood on his hands who didn't flinch. They buried the bodies deep, and after that day, no one came to bother the Hauser land again. But word traveled, and the name Jake Hauser started to carry weight, and he became a man grown. Jake didn't trust guns made by other men. Said they were too clean, too predictable, just like the men who built them. He needed something different. Something more alive. So he scavenged parts. A broken Navy Colt barrel, a rusted trigger from a buried Confederate revolver, ironwood for the grip. And when the gun was nearly complete, he found the final piece. A rattlesnake. He caught it without flinching, stared it down as it hissed and coiled. Then he clipped its rattle and let it slither away into the night. The rattle was inlaid into the handle. A silver coil wrapped around the cylinder. When he fired it, the gun whispered. He practiced every day in the morning light and under the stars. He shot at bottles in the air, tin cans dancing on fence posts. He never missed. Not once. Soon people stopped calling it a gun. They called it a curse. Jake tried to go straight once. He joined a cattle rundown near Tucson. Worked hard. Kept his head down. Even smiled once in a while. But peace didn't stick to him. It slid off like water on oiled leather. One night, over a crooked poker hand, a drifter knifed his trail partner in the neck. Jake watched him bleed out right there on the saloon floor. The drifter laughed and walked out like nothing had happened. Jake followed. Dragged the man into the street. Stripped him naked. Nailed his body to the sheriff's door with the man's own knife. He didn't say a word. Just stared at the sheriff, then walked away. Wanted posters followed the next week. First for questioning. Then for murder. Then for reward. $1,000. Then $3,000. Then $5,000. Each number stitched tighter to his name than the last. But Jake didn't care. He rode from town to town like a storm with no season. Never looking for trouble, but never backing down from it either. And if you dared pull a gun on him, you better not blink. Back to the present. The town of Devil's Hollow was barely a spit of buildings and flood when Jake rode in. He wasn't looking for a fight, he rarely was. But 5 men waited inside the abandoned saloon. A setup. Paid by the governor. Loaded for blood. A bounty to bring in Jake, dead or alive. It was supposed to be a trap, but Jake was always ready for trouble. Jake walked through the saloon doors like he was entering a chapel. Calm and confident. Whistling a slow, haunting tune. Swing low, sweet chariot, he hummed. The first man moved too fast, too loud. Jake shot him clean through the spine. The second panicked. His shot hit a chair. Jake's didn't miss. The others fell like dominoes, their blood staining the wooden floor. The 5th man begged. So Jake let him crawl. When it was over, Jake lit a cigarette from a candle, dropped a silver coin engraved with a rattlesnake on the counter, and stepped out into the rain. The thunder rolled. And Devil's Hollow never forgot the name Jake Hauser. Rattlesnake Jake. The lone survivor from the McGarry saloon sat trembling in the sheriff's office, face pale, hands still stained with another man's blood. You don't understand, he stammered. He wasn't even angry. He was just, like death wearing a man's face. The sheriff leaned in slowly. You sure it was Jake Hauser? The man nodded, lips barely moving. The sheriff stood, holstered his gun, and exhaled. Then God help us all, he muttered, because the rattlesnake's awake again. Watch out for part 2, No God, No Law.